Hey everyone, welcome. I'm Rebecca Pickens. If we haven't met before, I am a certified book coach, a developmental editor, and I'm host of Self-Editing Essentials, a group coaching program for fiction and memoir writers who are just finishing or almost finished writing their books and are ready to learn the art of self-editing. So today we are going to dive into a question from Carmen, who was a member of my Self-Editing Essentials group coaching program. And she is asking about something that I really enjoy talking about and thinking about and also reading, and that is character quirk. She is asking, how can I create quirks and mannerisms for a character that are authentic and not generic? In other words, they don't feel tacked on. And this question really made me pause when I received it because I am definitely a fan for quirky stories. I love characters who surprise me. I love characters who I haven't met before, who feel really fresh and different. But by the same token, my very least favorite kind of book is a book that is quirky and doesn't land the quirk. And thinking, how can I be so in love with some quirky characters and others drive me up the wall? And it got me thinking about this question in a lot of different interesting ways that I want to share with you. So I always suggest rooting quirk in psychology and history. What do I mean by that? Quirks are going to work when they are believable, when they reflect exactly who your specific character is on the inside. And it's based on your character's experiences, their fears, their desires, or past trauma. In other words, these aren't just quirks that you adapt for your story just because they're funny. They really are rooted in meaning, rooted in history, and they tell us something really valuable about your character. So before you assign a quirk to a character, you want to stop and ask yourself why. Don't just add a gesture or habit because it's funny or cute and you want to write a quirky piece of fiction. Readers will be onto you and they will not get the same kind of experience that you're after when you're looking to put quirk into your story. Ask, why does this character bite their nails or fidget or tilt their head? What is it about their story, about their history that makes this an action they are often displaying? So, for example, a character nervously taps their pen because it reminds them of their meticulous father. It's a habit that you can attach to childhood anxiety. Using past experiences, things that have occurred in your character's life beforehand, um, can really give that character more depth and texture. Habits form, these quirks can form as a coping mechanism or a reaction to the past events of their lives. So, again, somebody who grew up in a chaotic household might double check locks obsessively. In other words, we're not just sticking in some quirk for quirkiness. We're doing it for more character insight. Quirks come from life, not just our imaginations. And so I wholeheartedly recommend taking yourself out for a cup of coffee, bring a journal and pen, and really watch people. Notice the quirky gestures, the unique gestures that some of them employ while they're having a conversation with somebody at the table beside you. Listen carefully for filler words, those words that fill in pauses, the potential discomfort that your character may be feeling. And then, of course, physical habits like a bouncing of the knee when they're nervous or adjusting their glasses if they don't feel respected or listened to. So just a fun little exercise the next time you're out and you find yourself with a pen and paper and no one else to talk to, just start looking around and observe 5 habits that you notice that really catch your eye and you think you could weave into your story in some kind of an interesting way. The next tip is make quirks consistent, not constant. A quirk is going to be really believable when it is preceded by a trigger that's placed in your story in a very natural, seamless kind of way. So if a stressful incident occurs, that's going to trigger whatever nervous habit you have assigned this character. Romantic tension, well, we get a flirty gesture. Quirks can also be really strategically placed in your story in order to help you drive forward that character arc. Quirks can begin to evolve over time. You may show a character who, for whatever reason, starts to develop a quirk in your story. Likewise, you can also show a character who, as they make progress in their lives and start to find clarity around some source of difficulty, maybe those quirks start to diminish. But these can be used to mark change and evolution in a character. Tying mannerisms to emotion is going to give your quirks a lot more resonance and really make them interesting and believable. So mannerisms are external actions. They're things we can see with our eyes, but what they're really doing is reflecting all that the internal state of your character, the stuff we can't see on the surface. So instead of just having her twirl her ring, which would just be this isolated physical moment, try having your character twirl her ring, then remove it, tuck it into her pocket, and put it back on. This gives you so much more range to play with. Suddenly, we see this character as someone who is maybe wrestling with feelings that are at conflict with each other. It can be anger, ambivalence, nostalgia. All these different feelings are all tangled up together. And so she's giving you this really kind of quirky, contradictory action that we may see repeated throughout the story. Using combinations and contradictions is a really colorful, fun way to give your story some more interest, some more texture. And you do this by combining traits for depth and memorability. So, for example, you may have a character who is putting themselves out as very confident, but they have this quirk whenever they talk to people with authority or children or whoever it is you want to spotlight in this moment. Maybe they start fiddling with their necklace. And that's how we know your character isn't everything that they appear to be initially. There's stuff going on internally that's interesting, that hints at conflict of some kind. And of course, that keeps readers curious and engaged. Maybe you have a rule follower who secretly smuggles snacks from the cafeteria. This could be a really fun thing to play with. Again, this character is not who they appear to be on the surface. Contradictions make your quirks stand out because they're a juxtaposition. They don't make sense. But it also makes your character feel even more real because, of course, most of us are pretty complicated and we're not one way all the time. And so quirks can really bring that up and make your character feel multidimensional. So you want to generate some authentic quirks. How do you do it? What are some tools to facilitate that? You can think of this formula: trait plus trigger plus the expression of that trait. So you're mixing personality traits, emotional triggers, and physical and speech patterns or expressions together. You can think about if you want to go in and dive into your manuscript and really think about, okay, where can I weave some quirks in? Make a life map for your character. Chart significant life events. Identify the habits and gestures that then come as a consequence of those character life events. Really, to get to the core of this, really interview your character. Notice repeated phrases and gestures that they may already be showing in your story. Sometimes we've given our character traits we're not even aware of until we go back to revise our work, and what suddenly we notice, oh yeah, this is something my character does that I as the writer was almost unconscious of. And those quirks can be a delight because they feel really authentic because they've sort of come from your unconscious. Sensory association, linking quirks to sights and sounds and smells and textures is another way to think about the things that trigger your character to behave in a certain way. What do loud noises do to your character? What do rainstorms do to your character? What do foul smells do to your character? What kind of quirks, what kind of actions are generated as a result to exposures like this? I love revision. I'm all about revision. So I want to spend a little time here thinking about how we revise quirks and mannerisms when we are revisiting a manuscript. The first thing we want to do is really check for authenticity. I told you there are some quirky stories that kind of drive me bananas, if I'm being honest. And when I really think about those stories, I'm it's crystal clear to me what doesn't land well, and I'm sure I'm not alone in this. It's when a quirk doesn't feel authentic. It's when the writer's like, I'm going to be zany and just start sticking in these kind of filler quirks that don't really reflect who the character is. They almost create a distance. They make the character seem silly, and there's this like buffer between us and them. And we don't want that. We want your reader to really connect with your character. So quirks should be authentic. They can be colorful, they can be zany, but they need to match the vibe of your character. So avoid quirks that feel too cute or forced. Also, as you're working through revisions, ensure consistency and always look for that trigger that preceded the behavior. So quirks should only appear when emotionally or situationally logical. Track your characters' habits, track their quirks as they appear in the manuscript, and make sure that they are evolving in a way that makes sense, and that is aligned with the story that's unfolding and it aligns with their own character arc. Show don't tell, letting quirks reveal the internal stakes, or sorry, the internal state of your character instead of labeling traits. So, for example, um, he tapped his foot impatiently. This shows anxiety or frustration without saying my character was really anxious or frustrated, right? It's letting us decide what emotions to attach to that particular behavior. We want to avoid overloading. Sometimes when we have a character who is really fun and quirky and we like writing about that quirk, it's very easy in an early draft to kind of hit the reader over the head with whatever this action is that your character, whatever the quirk is that your character is expressing. So focus on very distinctive, meaningful quirks. We don't need a whole variety of them. Less is more in this instance. It will force us to really focus on the ones that matter and that are telling us something important about your character and their journey. Then I want you to really look for contradictions and depth. Are the quirks in your story revealing hidden layers of depth or showing your character to be more vulnerable than we initially thought they might be? Look for that. That's a good indicator that your quirk is serving a meaningful purpose in your story. And then read it aloud. Read your manuscript aloud. There are a million good reasons to do this, but when you decide to go ahead and read your manuscript aloud or hear it read back to you, be listening for those quirky moments. Do they hit you over the head or are they part of the narrative? Do they just feel like another way of learning about the character that doesn't feel forced? And ask your beta readers if you have really specific concerns about the quirks being a little too quirky or not tied well to your storyline and the character's arc. Just ask a beta reader. They're going to be great at picking out what is not working in that regard. And then finally, quirks fade, they intensify, they transform. Is that happening in your story in a way that aligns with the trajectory of your story's narrative and character arcs? This is really, really important. We don't want a character to start out with a quirk that's really significant and then just suddenly disappears in the middle of the story, despite the fact that they are still undergoing some really big challenges, right? We may want to show that resolution later on when your character is starting to resolve whatever conflict they're being challenged by. Finally, I love mentor texts. I'm all about them. If you've watched other videos, you'll know that this is something that I highly encourage readers to do is to find books that can show you what some of the concepts you're working through look like in the wild on their pages. And so these are a few mentor texts I suggest looking at. They've got loads of fun, kind of wacky, quirky characters. Remember, quirks don't need to be super colorful. They're great fun when they are, but they can also be very grounded in reality and realistic characters. So if you're doing more of a kind of a serious piece of literary fiction or a thriller where your characters are sort of archetypal in certain ways, you can still use Quirk to make your stories really come to life and make these characters feel real to us. So check these out. And if you are interested in learning more about how to use mentor texts to practice craft, I'm going to put a link to a video I did about mentor texts right here in the comments section, because that can really help you think about how to use books like the ones I've suggested to learn this element of craft. I hope this was helpful. If you enjoyed this, I would be so grateful if you would hit like and subscribe to my channel. I will be dropping new videos just like this one every week, all about all things related to writing, revision, publishing, editing. And if you have a question, please reach out in the comments. I would be happy to make a video like this for you. So let me know and keep in touch. Thanks, everyone.